The photograph was old, cracked at the edges, and tucked inside a cheap wooden frame with one corner missing. The glass had a thin line across it, like someone had once dropped it and then decided it was still too precious to throw away. To Serafina Vale, it looked worthless. To Keisha Bryant, it was the only picture she had left of her grandmother. And to billionaire Gabriel Whitmore, it was about to become the one thing that broke open the silence his family had kept buried for 38 years. The engagement dinner at Whitmore House had been perfect until that moment. Crystal chandeliers burned like stars above the marble dining hall. White roses climbed the golden pillars. Silver candles trembled in tall glass holders. Wealthy guests sat around the long table in black tuxedos and silk gowns, pretending not to notice the black maid standing near the service cart with tears in her eyes. Keisha Bryant was 31, a black single mother with deep dark skin, tired brown eyes, and a black and white maid uniform pressed so carefully it looked like dignity stitched into cotton. She had been told not to bring personal items into the dining hall. But the photograph had not been meant for anyone to see. It had been inside her small cloth bag, wrapped in a clean handkerchief, because the staff room door did not lock properly, and Keisha trusted the photo more in her own hands than in a drawer anyone could open. Beside the kitchen doorway stood her 5-year-old daughter, Lila, holding a tiny yellow sweater against her chest. Lila was supposed to be in the staff sitting room. But when she heard Serafina raise her voice, she came running. And now every powerful person in the room was watching her mother be humiliated. Serafina stood in the center of the dining hall in a fitted pearl-white designer gown, diamonds dripping from her ears, her blonde hair pinned perfectly beneath the chandelier light. In one hand, she held Keisha's family photo. In the other, she held Keisha's small cloth bag. "What is this?" Serafina asked loudly. Keisha swallowed. "It's mine, Miss Vale." Serafina smiled. "That wasn't my question. I asked why a maid is carrying personal junk through my engagement dinner." A few guests looked down at their plates. No one spoke. Keisha stepped forward carefully. "Please. It's just a photo." Serafina turned the frame toward the guests as if she were showing evidence of a crime. 3 black women stood in front of a small old diner with peeling blue paint and a hand-painted sign that read Bryant's Kitchen. One older woman stood in the middle, proud and smiling, with an apron tied around her waist. Beside her was Keisha's mother as a young woman. And beside them, half hidden near the diner door, stood a young white woman with soft eyes, one hand resting over her pregnant stomach. No one at the table cared. No one except Lila. "That's Grandma Rose," the child whispered. Keisha shook her head quickly. "Lila, baby, go back." But Serafina heard her. "Oh," she said. "So the child is part of this too." Then she walked to the silver trash bin beside the dessert table and dropped the photo inside. Keisha gasped like something had been pulled from her chest. "Please don't." Serafina turned back with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "If it matters so much, maybe you should keep it somewhere cleaner." Lila ran forward before anyone could stop her. "No." She reached into the trash with both small hands and pulled the photo out. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled, but she held the frame tightly against her chest. "That's Mommy's family." At the far end of the room, Gabriel Whitmore finally looked up. He was 38, tall, handsome, dressed in a black tuxedo, with the controlled expression of a man who had learned not to react in public. But when Lila held the photograph under the chandelier light, something made him stand. Slowly, his eyes fixed on the picture. "Let me see that." Serafina's smile faltered. "Gabriel, it's nothing. Just some old photo the maid brought into the dining room." But Gabriel was already walking forward. Lila looked at her mother. Keisha nodded, though her whole body was shaking. The child held the photo up. Gabriel took it carefully. And then the room watched the billionaire's face lose all color. Because the white woman in that old picture was not a stranger. It was his mother, Eleanor Whitmore, dead for 8 years. Standing outside a poor neighborhood diner, visibly pregnant, smiling beside Keisha's grandmother like she belonged there. Gabriel turned the photo over. On the back, written in his mother's handwriting, were 7 words. "Rosalie fed me when no one else would." Gabriel's fingers tightened around the frame. His voice came out lower than anyone expected. "Where did you get this?" Keisha could barely speak. "It belonged to my grandmother." Serafina stepped forward fast. "Gabriel, your mother was photographed everywhere. Charity events, shelters, hospitals. This doesn't mean anything." Gabriel lifted one hand. She stopped. Not because he shouted. Because he didn't. And quiet anger from Gabriel Whitmore was colder than any scream. He stared at the picture again. "My mother hated being photographed when she was pregnant." The room changed. Keisha looked up. Serafina looked away. And Gabriel noticed both. Whitmore House had always been a place where secrets dressed well. The mansion sat on 12 acres outside Atlanta, with white stone walls, long balconies, and gardens clipped so perfectly they looked afraid to grow. Every hallway had portraits. Every room had rules. Every piece of silver had a place. Gabriel had inherited all of it. The money, the house, the company, and the silence. His father, Richard Whitmore, had been a man of control. He controlled the board, the family name, the staff, the newspapers, and, for most of her life, Eleanor Whitmore. Gabriel's mother had been different. Warm. Soft-spoken. Remembering every employee's birthday. Sending food to drivers during storms. Sitting in the kitchen with the cook when she thought no one was watching. As a child, Gabriel had loved that about her. As an adult, he never understood it. His father called it weakness. "Your mother lets people too close," Richard used to say. "That is why she gets hurt." But Eleanor never stopped. Even after Richard died, even after Gabriel became the face of Whitmore Hotels and Whitmore Properties, she kept writing notes, sending baskets, funding small programs that never appeared in the company reports. Then she died suddenly. A stroke, the doctors said. And after the funeral, half her personal archive disappeared. Letters, journals, old charity documents. Gabriel asked about them once. His father's old attorney said some private items had been destroyed at Eleanor's request. Gabriel believed him because grief made belief easier than searching. Now, standing in his dining hall with Keisha's old photo in his hand, he was no longer sure grief had hidden the truth. Maybe someone had. Serafina Vale had entered his life 2 years after Eleanor's death. She was elegant, intelligent, image-perfect, and came from a family whose money had grown old enough to sound respectable. She knew how to host dinners, how to charm board members, how to speak about charity with the exact amount of sadness in her voice. Gabriel had mistaken Polish for peace. He had mistaken control for loyalty. Serafina looked perfect beside him. And maybe, deep down, that had been easier than looking for something real. Keisha Bryant had arrived at Whitmore House 6 months earlier. Temporary staff at first. Then full-time. She worked quietly. Never asked for favors. Never stayed near guests longer than needed. She moved through the house like someone trying not to leave footprints. But Gabriel had noticed her anyway. He noticed that she brought her daughter only on late nights, and only because the babysitter cost too much. He noticed that Lila sat with crayons in the staff hallway and never ran through the mansion. He noticed that Keisha thanked the kitchen staff even when she looked exhausted. And once, during a storm, he noticed Keisha standing at the back door with an umbrella, making sure an older houseman reached his car safely. It reminded him of his mother. That was why Serafina noticed too. And that was why she hated Keisha before she had a reason. The first insult had been private. Keisha was arranging dessert plates in the service pantry when Serafina entered, smiling as if they were friends. "You're very careful with the silver," she said. Keisha nodded. "Yes, Don't say It makes me feel like I'm talking to someone's grandmother." Keisha lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." Serafina looked toward Lila, who was coloring quietly near a stack of folded napkins. "And your child?" "My sitter cancelled. Mrs. Avery said she could stay in the staff room." Serafina's eyes narrowed. Children always find ways to be seen. Keisha's hands paused. "She won't disturb anyone." "People like you always say that," Serafina replied. "Then suddenly there's a sad story in the hallway, a little face near the kitchen door, and my guests are supposed to feel guilty for having more." Keisha said nothing. She needed the job. Her rent was behind. Lila's school needed payment. And the old Bryant family photo was wrapped in her bag because earlier that week, her room had been searched by someone who did not bother putting things back in the right place. That search had not been random. Keisha knew it. Serafina knew it. But proving it was another thing. 3 weeks before the engagement dinner, Keisha had come back from serving brunch and found her staff room drawer open. Her extra uniform was unfolded. Lila's sweater had been moved. And the sealed envelope from her grandmother was gone. Not the photo. The envelope. Her grandmother Rosalie had given it to Keisha 2 months before she died. "Keep this with the picture," Rosalie had said, her voice thin from illness. "One day, somebody from that world may come asking what happened. Don't give it to anyone cruel." "What world, Grandma?" Rosalie smiled sadly. "The world that forgot who fed it." Keisha never opened the envelope. She was afraid of what it might ask of her. Then it disappeared. And the same week, Serafina began pushing Gabriel to sell the South Atlanta lots that Whitmore Properties still own near the old Bryant's kitchen site. A luxury wellness complex, she called it. Private spa. Membership club. Rooftop pool. Her name on the launch campaign. Gabriel had not said yes, but he had not said no. The land had sat empty for years. No one had explained why his mother refused to sell it while she lived. Now he was beginning to understand. Back in the dining hall, Gabriel still held the photo. Every guest waited. Serafina tried to soften her face. Darling, this is becoming uncomfortable. The maid is clearly emotional, and the child is upset. Let's handle it privately. Keisha flinched at the word maid. Lila hugged the photo closer when Gabriel gently gave it back. My mommy has a name, she said quietly. Serafina turned. The smile vanished for half a second. What did you say? Lila's voice shook, but she repeated it. My mommy has a name. The room went silent. Gabriel looked at the little girl. Something in his expression changed. His mother would have loved that child, he thought. Then he looked at Serafina. Why did you throw the photograph away? Serafina's lips parted. No answer came fast enough. And Gabriel noticed. He always noticed, but tonight, for the first time, he was willing to understand what he saw. It was inappropriate, Serafina said finally. Personal items don't belong in a formal dining room. Gabriel looked toward the silver trash bin. So you threw it away? I was making a point. To a woman working in my home? To an employee who needed boundaries. Keisha lowered her eyes. That was the sentence. Boundaries. Rich people loved that word when they meant distance. Gabriel turned toward his oldest housekeeper. Mrs. Avery. The elderly woman near the wall straightened. Yes, Mr. Whitmore. Bring me my mother's archive box. Serafina's face changed. Gabriel, not here. He looked at her. You chose here. A murmur moved through the guests. Mrs. Avery left quickly. Serafina stepped closer to Gabriel, lowering her voice. You are humiliating me. He looked down at the photo. No. I'm learning you. The sentence landed harder than a shout. Keisha held Lila close, not daring to breathe too loudly. Mrs. Avery returned with a dark green archive box trimmed in gold. Gabriel placed it on the dining table and opened it. Inside were old letters, foundation receipts, newspaper clippings, and his mother's private notes. He searched until he found a small leather journal with Eleanor's initials pressed into the cover. His hands trembled when he opened it. Several pages were missing. Torn out. Serafina looked away. Gabriel noticed that too. Then a folded paper slipped from the back cover. He opened it. The top line read, Bryant House Food Trust. Keisha whispered, Bryant House. Mrs. Avery covered her mouth. Gabriel read silently at first. Then aloud. In honor of Rosalie Bryant, who sheltered me when my family turned me away, I placed the old diner land and surrounding lots into trust. This property is to be used for food service, childcare, job training, and emergency housing for women and children in need. Keisha's knees nearly gave out. Lila clutched her mother's uniform. Gabriel kept reading, his voice rough now. If my son Gabriel ever asks where he learned kindness, tell him it began before he was born, in a kitchen where no one asked my last name before feeding me. The dining hall went completely still. The truth was not polished. It was not the kind of story rich families framed. Eleanor Whitmore had once been pregnant, frightened, and rejected by the people who should have protected her. Rosalie Bryant had taken her in, fed her, hidden her, helped her survive. And the land where Bryant's kitchen once stood had been protected by Eleanor as a promise. A promise someone had tried to erase. Gabriel looked down at the missing pages in the journal. Then at Serafina. Where are the rest of the documents? Her eyes widened. What? The pages from my mother's journal. The letter Keisha says vanished. The trust papers my legal team couldn't find last month when you pushed me to sell the South Atlanta lots. Serafina laughed shakily. You're connecting things that have nothing to do with each other. Am I? Mrs. Avery stepped forward, trembling. Sir, I saw Miss Vale in the archive room 2 weeks ago. Serafina snapped, that is a lie. Mrs. Avery's voice shook, but she continued. She had papers in her hand. When I asked if she needed help, she said Mrs. Whitmore's old charity notes were clutter and that after the wedding, she would organize everything properly. Gabriel's face hardened. Serafina's mask finally cracked. That land is worth $40 million, she said. $40 million, Gabriel. For what? A burned diner? A forgotten promise? Some sentimental story your mother wrote when she was emotional. Keisha stared at her. Lila whispered, Grandma Rose wasn't forgotten. Gabriel closed the journal. The sound was soft. Final. You knew what the photo meant. Serafina lifted her chin. I knew it could be misunderstood. You knew it connected Keisha's family to my mother. I knew it could make you irrational. You stole the envelope. I protected our future. Gabriel looked at the trash bin where the photo had landed moments earlier. You threw my mother's gratitude into the trash. Serafina's face flushed. She was a diner woman, Gabriel. Keisha went still. The room heard it. Even Serafina heard it after she said it. Too late. Gabriel stepped closer. Rosalie Bryant saved my mother. Serafina's eyes burned. And now her granddaughter wants a reward. Keisha finally lifted her head. I wanted my photo back. Her voice was quiet. But it carried. I never asked you for land. I never asked him for money. I came here to work. You took the only picture my daughter had of the woman who raised my family, and you threw it away because you thought no one important was in it. Gabriel turned toward her. Keisha's eyes were wet but steady. But someone important was in it. Your mother. Lila raised her tiny hand. And my grandma rose. Gabriel's face broke. He looked at the child, then at the photograph, then at the woman he had planned to marry. You didn't need to know who they were to treat them like human beings. Serafina stared at him. You're choosing a maid over me. No, Gabriel said. I'm choosing my mother's truth over your cruelty. The engagement ring on Serafina's hand flashed under the chandelier. For the first time, it looked cheap. Gabriel removed his own ring from his finger. The engagement is over. A gasp moved through the room. Serafina looked around for support. But the guests who had watched her humiliate Keisha now stared into their glasses, ashamed of their silence. Gabriel turned to his chief of staff. Miss Vale will be escorted to the guest suite. Her belongings will be removed tomorrow. Quietly. Serafina's voice shook. You'll regret this. Gabriel looked at the photo again. I already regret almost marrying someone my mother would have seen through in one dinner. Serafina left without another word. No one clapped. No one cheered. The silence did the work. When she was gone, Keisha bent down to pick up the torn frame. Gabriel stopped her gently. Please, let me. He picked up the photo from the table and held it with both hands. My mother was in your family photo, he said, still stunned. Keisha nodded. My grandmother said she was kind. Gabriel's eyes filled. She was. Lila looked up at him. Why was she sad in the picture? Gabriel crouched, still in his tuxedo. I think she was scared. Lila frowned. Grandma Rose helped her. Yes, Gabriel whispered. I think she did. Lila touched the corner of the frame. Then you should fix her house. Keisha quickly said, Lila. But Gabriel shook his head. No. She's right. The next morning, Gabriel's legal team reopened the Whitmore archive. By noon, the missing trust pages were found in Serafina's private planning binder, hidden beneath vendor contracts for a luxury spa proposal. By evening, the sale of the South Atlanta lots was cancelled. Within a week, Gabriel visited the old Bryant's kitchen site with Keisha and Lila. The building was smaller than he expected. Blue paint peeled from the walls. The windows were boarded. Weeds grew through cracks in the sidewalk. But when Keisha stood in front of it, she did not see ruin. She saw her grandmother handing out biscuits. Her mother washing dishes. Herself as a little girl sitting at the counter, learning that poor did not have to mean empty. Gabriel stood beside her, holding his mother's journal. I grew up in mansions, he said quietly. And somehow I think my mother felt more at home here. Keisha wiped a tear. My grandmother had that effect. Lila pressed her small hand to the door. Can people eat here again? Gabriel looked at Keisha. Only if your mother says yes. Keisha stared at him. What does that mean? It means the trust was meant for your family to help lead it. Not me. Not my board. You. I'm a maid. No, Gabriel said gently. You are Rosalie Bryant's granddaughter. And you know what, this place was supposed to be better than anyone in my world ever could. Keisha did not say yes that day. She had learned not to trust doors that opened too quickly. But Gabriel did not push. He hired lawyers to restore the trust. He returned every missing document to Keisha. He created a board that included community leaders, former diner workers, single mothers, nurses, and teachers. And one seat stayed empty until Keisha was ready. 3 months later, she sat in it. Bryant House reopened the following spring. Not as a luxury spa. Not as a photo opportunity. As a community kitchen, childcare center, job training program, and emergency housing wing for women and children who needed a safe door before they needed a speech. On opening day, the old family photo hung near the entrance. Not in a cheap broken frame. In simple dark wood. Underneath it were 2 names. Rosalie Bryant and Eleanor Whitmore. 2 women from different worlds. 1 promise. Lila stood beneath the photo in a yellow dress and looked up proudly. Mommy, Grandma Rose is famous now. Keisha laughed through tears. No, baby. She's remembered. Gabriel came to stand beside them. He did not try to turn the moment into romance. He did not turn gratitude into a public performance. He simply stood quietly with the woman whose family had saved his mother long before he was born. And for the first time since Eleanor died, Gabriel felt as if he had found a piece of her that grief had hidden from him. Keisha looked at him. Your mother wrote that kindness began here. Gabriel nodded. I think she was right. Later that evening, after the guests were gone and the kitchen lights glowed warm through the windows, Keisha placed Lila's hand on the old counter. "This," she said, "is where your great-grandmother fed people." Lila smiled. "And now we do too." Keisha looked around at the restored tables, the fresh bread, the women laughing softly in the childcare room, the smell of soup in the kitchen. "Yes," she whispered. "Now we do too." So never judge the woman serving your table. Never throw away someone's family photo because you think it has no value. Never assume poor memories are small memories. Because sometimes the truth is not hidden in a safe. Sometimes it is sitting inside a cracked wooden frame. Sometimes it is held by a child who refuses to let it be thrown away. And sometimes, when the wrong person throws a picture into the trash, the right person finally sees who was in it. If this story touched your heart, like the video, comment where you're watching from, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes kindness always finds its way back. And the next story begins when a billionaire's bride makes the maid carry her wedding train, not knowing a hidden letter is sewn inside.